You work hard every single day, you've cut out every little non-essential expense, you scrape and save every dollar, and yet, at the end of the month, your wallet is still empty, not even enough to cover basic living costs or food. And it's not just you stuck in this situation. In today's economy, there are countless others trapped in the same poverty traps without even realizing it, which is why they still can't break free. So what are these traps that are quietly draining your finances every single day? And is there any way out? Let's find the answer together. And to make it easier to picture, let's start with a story from Bobo's everyday life. The first trap: the poorer you are, the more you have to pay. Every morning, Bobo starts his day struggling to start the old, beat-up car he bought secondhand for just $3,200. Because the car has long passed its prime and the engine system barely runs properly anymore, almost every month Bobo has to drop by the auto shop to change the oil, fix the cooling system, or patch up some new failure. Each visit costs anywhere from a few dozen to a few $100s and feels like just a temporary fix. But when he adds it all up at the end of the year, Bobo is shocked to realize the total repair cost is nearly equal to the price of a brand new car. Meanwhile, Bobo's coworker bought a new car and hasn't spent a single cent on maintenance, thanks to the warranty, and the new model is also extremely fuel efficient. That's when Bobo realizes he's paying a very expensive price for cheap means of transportation, simply because he doesn't have enough capital to own something more durable. Bobo's cost story doesn't end there. Because he doesn't have enough cash for a deposit on a decent apartment near the city center, Bobo has to rent a worn-out room on the city's outskirts. There, the outdated electrical and plumbing systems combined with old appliances make his monthly electricity bill significantly higher than what a modern apartment would cost. Even his meals, because the rented room is too cramped and has no proper kitchen, force Bobo to buy boxed lunches every day. He spends an average of $48 a month on lunch, while if he had the conditions to cook at home with proper equipment, the figure would only be around $12. Bobo wants to save, but poverty itself is robbing him of the very chance to save. To explain this situation, economists often refer to the boots theory. Imagine this. A good pair of boots costs $50 and lasts a solid 10 years. But because Bobo only has $10 in his pocket, he's forced to buy the cheap pair. The result? That pair falls apart after just 1 year, and he has to keep buying replacements. After 10 years, Bobo has spent a total of $100, double what the wealthy person spent, yet his feet have always been stuck in lousy shoes. Bobo's old car is exactly that pair of boots. He has to spend more, not because he's wasteful, it's because he doesn't have enough money to buy quality items that would actually save him more in the long run. This trap pulls Bobo into an exhausting loop. He works hard to earn money, but that money gets ground away by these very poverty costs. Car repairs, high electric bills, expensive food. He has no chance to accumulate anything because he's always paying for problems caused by using cheap old things. And now, Bobo has realized the system seems to be charging extra for his poverty. And if he doesn't find a way to break this loop, he'll forever be a worker just feeding the old machines around him. The second trap. Worrying about money makes your brain work worse. After an exhausting day at work, Bobo gets home in the evening, sits down, opens his phone, and starts doing the math. Rent is due soon, the car needs another oil change, the electric bill keeps climbing, he can't sleep a wink that whole night. Not because he has insomnia, it's because his mind is trapped in a horrible loop of unsolved money equations. The next morning, Bobo carries that exhaustion into the office. Just as he's trying to muster all his focus to finish the most important report of the month, his phone buzzes. It's a message from his landlord reminding him about rent, along with an urgent payment request for last week's car repair. Instantly, a dark cloud of anxiety completely smothers Bobo's clarity. All morning, even though his eyes stay glued to the screen, his mind has actually left the office to spin around one question. Where am I going to find $200 right now? As a result, Bobo botches everything he touches, makes catastrophic data errors, and gets reprimanded by his boss for being inattentive. This decline has nothing to do with Bobo being lazy or unintelligent. Scientists at Harvard and Princeton call this the tunneling effect. When Bobo falls into financial distress, his brain automatically narrows his field of vision and pours all its resources into the most urgent problem in front of him. Like someone walking through a pitch-black tunnel who can only see a single sliver of light at the end. For Bobo, that sliver of light is the $200 for rent. When his brain is hijacked by so much survival anxiety, he no longer has the energy to be creative, to make good judgments, or to spot the long-term opportunities for advancement around him. A study published in the journal Science also proved that financial stress can drop a person's IQ by 13 to 14 points. That's the equivalent of pulling an all-nighter or suffering serious cognitive impairment. For Bobo, this means that when he's worrying about debt, his decision-making ability is on par with someone who's drunk or completely burned out. Because his brain has lost its capacity for risk analysis, in a moment of desperation, Bobo taps into a quick loan app with predatory interest rates. He knows it's a wrong decision, but because he's stuck in the tunnel, he just wants to escape the shadow of debt pressing down on him in that very second. This trap creates a brutal cycle. Money worries weaken the brain, leading to bad decisions, and those bad decisions push Bobo even deeper into financial shortage. While the wealthy have enough money to leisurely think about investing or learning new skills, Bobo is locked away counting every last coin. He realizes a simple truth: rich people aren't necessarily smarter. They just don't have to burn so much mental energy on basic survival. For Bobo, escaping poverty has now become a battle to reclaim control of his own intellect from the survival worries that imprison him every day. The third trap. Getting a raise, but life doesn't get any better. After being worn down by punishing costs and a brain frozen by anxiety, Bobo still clings to one last sliver of hope: the annual salary review. He tells himself, just as soon as my pay goes up, things will stabilize. But this is exactly where Bobo runs straight into an invisible trap where the numbers begin to lie to him about his own wealth. At the end of the month, Bobo receives the new pay slip with indescribable joy. His income has gone up by $20. For someone scraping by like Bobo, this number feels like a life ring tossed into a flood. He sits down excitedly at his desk, opens his expense notebook, and starts mapping out his future. But that brief joy quickly fades. As Bobo starts adding and subtracting the numbers in his actual spending, he's stunned to realize the figure on paper has gone up, but his real purchasing power has slid backwards. The first reason lies in the gap between nominal wages and essential costs. According to actual economic reports for the 2025 to 2026 period, while average wages rose only about 5.3%, the very things Bobo has to pay for rose much higher. Transportation costs were up 11.1%, healthcare services up 12%, and rent up nearly 8%. At the same time, Bobo's old car has been guzzling more money for fuel as gas prices peaked, and the electric bill at his outskirts rental has been creeping up alongside the market. The result? That extra $20 was completely swallowed by inflation before Bobo could even touch it, just to compensate for the rising cost of his most basic survival needs. And it doesn't stop there. Bobo also falls into a side trap called the cost of going to work. To live up to the new salary and the higher job demands, the company now requires Bobo to be physically in the office more often instead of working flexibly. Now Bobo runs the math again. Salary up $20, but gas costs up $8, and eating out, because he no longer has time to prep food, up another $12. In the end, his real take-home after these added costs comes out to a perfect zero. He's working more, taking on bigger responsibility, yet his actual standard of living is stuck in place. This is the difference between nominal income and real income. Wealthy people can easily cut luxury spending to fight inflation, but for Bobo, every expense is survival. He has nothing left to cut except shrinking his food portions or sitting in the dark to save electricity. This third trap completes the loop strangling Bobo's life. He pays more because he's poor, his thinking degrades because he worries about money, and finally his attempt to earn more is ground down by hidden costs and inflation. Now Bobo realizes with a shock that he's like someone running on a treadmill. No matter how hard he sprints, he stays stuck in one place while the world around him keeps getting more expensive. The number on his employment contract turns out to be just an illusion, masking the stagnation of the wealth he's been desperately trying to build. So what do you do once you know these three traps are pulling you down? After seeing through all three traps surrounding him, Bobo stands at a crossroads. Either let this whirlpool drag him under, or find a way to swim against the current. Bobo understands he can't escape these traps overnight, so he needs a strategy to systematically cut loose from each one. Bobo's first step is to face the poorer you are, the more you pay trap head on. Instead of paying for repairs on the broken down car every few months, Bobo decides to set up a strict scheduled maintenance plan to prevent major failures before they happen. And for everyday household items, Bobo starts applying the rule of buy once, use for 10 years. Instead of buying 5 cheap pairs of shoes over 5 years, he scrimps to buy a single high-quality pair. Bobo understands that pooling money to buy something good isn't waste. It's the only way to stop paying the so-called poverty tax on items that fall apart quickly. Next, to defeat the trap of the hijacked brain, Bobo needs to free up his mental bandwidth. He realizes that worrying all day about money doesn't help him earn more. It usually just makes him dumber. So Bobo sets up a small peace of mind fund, starting with just $20 a month. He won't touch this money. The mere presence of this reserve, however small, helps Bobo's brain shed some of that horrifying end-of-month survival mode. Once his stomach isn't churning with rent panic, Bobo finds himself sharper at the office, making fewer mistakes, and finally clear-headed enough to spot side gigs or promotion opportunities that the tunneling effect had been hiding from him. Finally, to avoid being fooled by the salary illusion trap, Bobo changes the way he looks at his own income. He no longer celebrates when the contract number goes up. Instead, Bobo focuses on the metric of real income after expenses. He starts keeping careful records. If his salary goes up $20, but gas and eating out also go up $20, he reminds himself that his standard of living is still standing still. To break this, Bobo proactively cuts hidden costs by prepping his own lunch in his rented room instead of buying boxed meals, and finds ways to optimize his commute to save fuel. Every dollar he holds back through these cuts becomes the first real income that lets him finally start accumulating something. Bobo's journey now has a clear direction, and he's no longer being pulled deeper down. By prioritizing quality items, creating breathing room for his brain, and managing income by real value, Bobo is gradually unbinding the invisible chains. He's no longer a passive victim of the economy. He's become a clear-eyed observer, slowly but surely rebuilding his own financial foundation. So as you can see, poverty isn't simply the result of a lack of effort. It's the consequence of invisible psychological and economic traps that quietly run every single day, from the poverty tax that grinds down living costs, to the tunneling effect that paralyzes the mind, to the salary illusion that gets swallowed by inflation before it can ever create real change. Escaping poverty is the result of clear, persistent choices. When you choose to buy a quality item that lasts, when you scrape together every last coin to build breathing room for your brain, and when you see through illusory numbers to manage your finances with reason instead of emotion. So never blame yourself for being incompetent when you're still struggling every day. Instead, start by cutting the strings tying down your feet. Because once you've recognized the trap, only then do you actually have a chance to step over it. And if you have any other questions or concerns about everyday financial issues, leave them in the comments below so we can unpack them together in future videos. See you next time.